Local news is caught in this really strange paradox right now. On one hand, it's facing a massive, undeniable crisis. But on the other hand, something new, something different is quietly being built from the ashes. This is a story of both a huge collapse and a quiet reinvention. So that brings us to the big question, right? When you look around at all the shuttered papers and empty newsrooms, you kind of have to ask, is local news actually dying? Is this really it?
Well, here's the thing. The answer is no. The old model, the one that was corporate-owned and funded by ads, that's what's collapsing. But journalism itself isn't dying. It's just being forced to evolve. You could say it's being reborn.
Okay, so to really understand this rebirth, first we have to get our heads around the sheer scale of the collapse. And the numbers, when you see them all laid out, wow, they are truly staggering. Let's take a quick look at the damage.
Let's start in the United States, which is pretty much the epicenter of this crisis. Since 2005, almost 3,500 newspapers have just vanished. Think about that. That's more than 2 newspapers closing their doors every single week for years and years.
And the human cost to that is just incredible. 75% drop in newsroom jobs. I mean, that's not just a statistic. That's 270,000 journalists, editors, and photographers whose careers just disappeared, taking all the stories they would have told right along with them. Now, if we look just north to Canada, the financial picture is just as bleak. In only the last decade, total newspaper revenue has plummeted by a crazy 59%. The advertising model that literally held up journalism for a century has completely imploded.
So, what does this all actually mean for people? Well, millions are now living in what we call news deserts. We're talking 50 million Americans, over 4 million people in the UK, and 2.5 million Canadians who now have almost no access to credible reporting about what's happening in their own towns and cities. So why? Why is all of this happening? Well, it's not just one thing. It's really 2 powerful forces that have put the collapse on fast forward. The total dominance of big tech in the ad world and the rise of a whole new kind of owner on Wall Street.
And this is where you really see the clash of 2 completely different philosophies. The old model, which is now pretty much run by corporate chains and hedge funds, it's all about serving shareholders. But the goal isn't to run a healthy news business for the long haul, it's to squeeze out as much profit as possible, right now. They do it by slashing staff, selling buildings, gutting the actual journalism. But the new model, it's built to serve readers. It's funded directly by them and driven by a mission, not just by profit.
And believe me, this isn't just theory. You can see it in the real world. In Canada, Postmedia is 98% owned by U.S. hedge funds. In the UK, Reach plc is constantly cutting costs for its shareholders. And in the U.S., Sinclair has become infamous for forcing its local stations to run corporate-controlled segments. That control led to this absolutely chilling moment in 2018. Dozens of local news anchors, people their communities trusted, were forced to read the exact same pre-written script warning about fake news. They had to use their local credibility to read words dictated from corporate headquarters that actually said the whole thing was extremely dangerous to our democracy. The irony is just staggering.
But, and this is a big but, that is not the end of the story. Because out of all that crisis, something pretty incredible started to happen. A new generation of journalists and entrepreneurs looked at the wreckage and basically said, fine, we'll just build a new one from the ground up. And you know what? They're proving a different way is absolutely possible.
And this isn't just a few little experiments here and there. This is a real movement, and it's popping up everywhere. You've got the ambitious nonprofit Baltimore Banner in the US, the fiercely independent reader-funded Tyee in Canada, you've got the smart subscription-based Mill Media in the UK, and even Compass Media in the Cayman Islands. They're all finding their own way to make it work.
So, what's their secret? The playbook is actually beautifully simple, and it's so powerful. It all starts with a laser focus on one community. Then, they build trust the old-fashioned way, with really good, credible reporting. That trust earns them direct support from readers, which they then pour right back into doing, you guessed it, more great journalism. It's a virtuous cycle, and it's replacing the old destructive one.
And the solutions aren't just coming from scrappy startups either. We're seeing some brilliant public-private partnerships. Just look at the BBC's local democracy reporting service in the UK. It has funded over 500,000 stories covering the essential nitty-gritty work of local government. You know, the stuff that had pretty much gone completely unreported.
All of this brings us to what might be the most important shift of all. It's a fundamental change in who actually holds the power. For a century, the future of news was basically in the hands of advertisers. Now, it's being decided by someone else entirely.
This really just gets to the heart of it all. For generations, journalism served advertisers. In the more recent era, it's been all about serving distant shareholders. But the only truly sustainable future? That's one where journalism is directly accountable to and serves its audience.
So let's just be crystal clear. The old way of doing things, that corporate, ad-driven newspaper chain, yeah, it's collapsing under its own weight. But that is not the same thing as the death of journalism. Not at all.
Instead, something much more resilient is being built on a new and, I think, stronger foundation. And that foundation is a direct relationship with the community, a relationship built on trust and the direct financial support of its readers.
Which in the end leaves us with one final, very personal question. The survival of local news no longer depends on some far-off corporation or advertiser. It depends on us. So the real question we all have to ask ourselves is, what kind of journalism do you believe your community is worth?